Thanks everyone for joining us today. Yeah, like he said, we're going to be talking today about common workflow breakdowns and how to fix them. So the title of our presentation is When RVs Aren't the Only Thing That Are Broken in Your Shop. So we'll be focusing on the common breakdowns and also offering some practical ideas that you could potentially go implement in your businesses at the end of this webinar. Also, like you said, don't hesitate to ask any questions. We'll try and answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. We'll also give you contact information for us, so you're free to reach out to us after the presentation via email, and we'll try to answer any additional questions that you might have. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by, oops. There we go. I'm going to start by just giving a quick introduction of myself. My name is Matt. I am the sales manager and director of customer relationships here at IDS, or Integrated Dealer Systems, DMS provider for the Stars. And prior to coming on to the software side of this, I spent 20 years in dealerships, started in fixed operations as a technician, in fact, and then moved up into management, and eventually general management and multi-location management. With me, I've got Mark Boswell. He's the founder and CEO of Crossroads of America Consulting. I'm going to turn it over to him to give you a brief recap of his experience in the industry as well.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, I'm Mark Boswell. Prior to becoming founder and CEO of Crossroads of America, I started in the trenches as a technician in the RV side of it, then moved up into management. Then I ended up going into multi-location regional place, and then got into the consulting. So been in fixed ops in the RV marine industry for well over 30 years, and I love it because I get to help people now doing consulting to improve fixed operations.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
It's an honor. I appreciate you letting me come aboard and be a part of this presentation. Thank you.
And just real quick, I'm going to reshare here because I was having some problems with my screen sharing. So let me just reshare it. Bear with me. Apologize for that.
There we go again.
All right. So why does this topic matter? So obviously, if you're like most of us, the demand for service exists in your businesses. Most dealerships that I encounter through my travels and interacting with different organizations have the experience of having a long backlog of service, and their biggest challenge is just getting through it all. They're only really limited by how efficient they are and how fast they can move through the work. If you're in a different situation and you're having trouble getting the work coming into your shop, your phones aren't ringing, that kind of thing, then maybe a different webinar is for you. But this one, I think, will appeal to most of us who have the problem of almost too much work or plenty of work to capitalize on and not enough hours in the day to do it. Yeah. So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Workflow breakdowns are often the biggest drag on our service department. They'll lead to low productivity from technicians, long repair event cycle times, and poor customer satisfaction. Those are all symptoms of this problem in these breakdowns. And there's a few key takeaways that we want everybody to walk away with. And I'm going to let Mark kind of run through these with you.
Well, the key things we want you to take away from is that when you get off this webinar, go back and kind of reanalyze. The takeaways would be, why are we busy? We think we're overswamped, but we're not getting things through there. Workflow problem. How do we regroup with that? Communication. Communication is a huge thing in most organizations. It's not that we don't have enough text. It's our communication. Your dispatch structure. We're going to take a look at that, and that's a critical role in what we accomplish daily on getting our throughput through that shop. Improving the documentation is a huge thing we'll cover as well. And then the importance of leadership and accountability, holding everyone, holding those processes and systems in place daily and monitoring them.
Yeah, the thing that we want everybody to kind of, if we're walking away from this and saying, I'm going to take one change in my mind set or how I approach fixed operations, it's that we want to remember that the in-service technicians are the only people who actually produce revenue for us in our service departments. Everything that we do should be in support of driving efficiency when it comes to our technicians. And so if you're not thinking about it that way, I would encourage you to reevaluate the way your shop and your service administrators, from management down to service riders and even lot porters, look at that.
Hours are the only things we have to sell every day.
Yep. And the reason we look at that, this is just a quick illustration. I'll let Mark run through this, of how much money we can be talking about when we're letting these hours slip through our fingers.
Yeah, looking at what we have here up on the screen, if you 8 technicians, and I would always expect technicians to do 10, 12 hours plus a day. And when we see anything less than that, we should be looking at it. But when we're looking and losing dollars and we do nothing about it, you look at $150 an hour, $3,600 a day with 8 technicians, that's over 900,000. If you take that to the $200 an hour, that's 1.2 million. So most of you guys are probably at 200 and above, but that's a huge amount of money that we're losing annually. It's crazy.
Yep. We don't want to look at service as a cost center, and we don't want to look at our costs and service as simply, or our opportunity costs and service as simply what we're paying our technicians to be there. The opportunity cost of losing these hours at $150 or $200 an hour is huge.
Yeah, if a lot of places are okay with technicians billing 4 or 5 hours a day. That's ridiculous. You're losing tons of revenue.
In addition to just the revenue from lost hours, we see without good workflow processes, we see repair event cycle times start to balloon. We all know what impacts those. I'll let Mark talk about that. But repair event cycle time not only matters for profitability, but it matters for customer retention and customer satisfaction, as well as mitigating our risks of litigation and things like that. I'll let Mark talk a little bit more on repair event cycle time.
Yeah, the repair event cycle time is huge. When I measure that, when you're in a dealership, it starts from the time that work order opens to the time that work order is closed, and everything in between there causes that repair cycle time to either be short or long. And most of it all comes around communication, not having the right documentation, not following through daily, not setting the expectations. That all sets that time. But people open up a work order and they don't manage it, and everything in between them. A service advisor's responsibility is cradle to grave.
Yeah, our 2 biggest bottlenecks in repair event cycle time are warranty coverage and out-of-part stock. If you guys have ever attended an RECT event or session with Don Miller here at IDS, who spearheads our repair event cycle time measurements and reporting, you'll know that the warranty coverage extends repair event cycle time dramatically. Out-of-part stock also does that. And then you put them together and we start to see repair event cycle times move up into the 70+ day averages across the industry. These are huge out of service times. And while we recognize that as dealers and service departments, we can't control every aspect of this. We can't control whether or not a part takes 2 weeks to leave the dock at the OEM or the parts supplier. But we can control whether it takes 2 weeks for us to process that unit through our shop, diagnose it, and identify the parts. And some of those other key places in between, where if we can tighten up our workflows and minimize those times, we can minimize the total aggregated time that unit is out of service.
Yeah, I wonder how many people on the webinar today are actually using that report to monitor their progress as far as on their parts on order, warranty, and that whole process. I'm curious.
Yep. Like we said, demand for service is strong. Great workflows is what converts that demand into profit. Um, and we've got a few symptoms that can indicate to us that workflows are, that maybe we have a problem with some of our workflows uh, operationally. And I'm going to let Mark talk about what those are.
Well, a lot of the problems I see is techs waiting on parts, techs waiting on units to come in and out of the shop, techs waiting for authorizations, whether it be warranty authorizations because we didn't get pre-authorization, or we didn't get authorization from the customer and we're not keeping in communication. Those are huge, working one unit at a time where they should be working two or plus units back and forth to keep that flow going. The information on an incomplete work order that's wrote up, it doesn't have all the information on it, correct information from customer. Now I'm calling customer. All of these things break down and cause us to have a longer rec time as far as definitely in the environment.
Yeah, I like the top one, techs waiting for work. There's all sorts of things that create that wait for the technician. But just if we take that just at face value in the most literal sense, when the technicians are literally waiting for work to be transitioned in and out of the shop, there's a certain amount of time that takes. It takes a certain amount of time to grab the unit, pull it out of the technician's base safely, move another unit in. And we can't, there's only so much we can do to make that actual process faster. And some of that's going to be facility restriction. Your facility is going to put restrictions on that. Some of it's going to be due to capacity. But there's a lot of things that we can do to reduce the amount of times that we need to do that. So
Right.
maybe it takes 10 minutes to swap a unit, and that's as fast as we can safely do it. That's okay. But what's not okay is when we start to do that 4 or 5 or 6 times for the same work order. And so we're going to look at some ways that we can try and minimize that, some different ways of thinking about repair events and how often we should be pulling units in and out. I think the point here, it can be tempting to blame technicians, saying it's hard to get technicians with good skills. It's hard to, warranty work is so hard to collect enough time on, and all this. We can start to blame these things that happen actually when the technicians turning a wrench. But more often we see the bigger breakdowns are in the workflow surrounding it.
Right. Everybody wants to blame that technician, and it's typically most of the time it's not. It's something broke within that process that they're doing. And,
yeah, which is good news. Should be good news for dealers and service departments on this call, because workflows are finding qualified technicians. We all know is a challenge, and then it can be even more challenging when we face the fact that we have to cultivate our own and train our own. That's time consuming. You can only build those technicians up so fast. So it should be good news to everybody on this call that, in fact, most of these inefficiencies lie outside of the technician's skill, and actually lie in things that we can change tomorrow if we have the mindset to do so.
correct.
So, Mark, why don't we talk about some of these the 5 major workflow breakdowns that you see that we're going to talk about here in the upcoming slides.
Yeah, unstructured dispatch process. We're going to talk about, if you advisors dispatching, or do you have a dedicated, shop foreman dispatcher in your shop? Communication gaps between parts and service. Are you having those meetings? Are you communicating back and forth? Because that's one team. It's not 2 separate departments. Incomplete or inefficient work orders. We talked about that. Not having the proper documentation. With digital now, we can do all of the taking photos of the customer's concerns and documenting that and making sure that we have that. Technician workflow interruptions. How many times are we interrupting our technicians, and what's causing those interruptions? They're supposed to be billing hours. Accountability. Are our managers holding our team accountable for the process and making sure that we have sufficient amount of work being done and billed daily? These are some of the things that we will be talking about, but each and every one of these is part of our daily flow throughput into that shop. So we'll get into that as we go into the slides.
Thank you, Mark. And this is where we're going to spend the majority of our time, is talking about each one of these five and giving you hopefully some practical things that you can take away, and just get your mind really thinking about these things, and where can we improve our processes so that we can keep our technicians turning a wrench in their bay, versus all of the other things that can distract us from that. So with that, let's jump into the unstructured dispatch process. Mark, I know you and I, talking about this in preparation for this webinar, discussed the fact that there's different philosophies around dispatching. Service riders handing it out, mini or versus a dispatch, a kind of a central dispatch model. But ultimately, I think what we both agreed is that more often than not, we walk into dealerships that have no real dispatch process. Maybe they have a process to actually assign the work. It would say, well, when I'm ready to assign the work, this is how I assign it. This is the piece of paper the technician gets, or this is how it gets assigned to them digitally. It goes on this chart at this point, or on this schedule, so that I can monitor the progress. That's all great. But often the actual process for deciding what work goes where and when is simply the technician gets done with a job, and then they walk up to the service rider and say, I'm done. And the service rider goes filtering through a bunch of work orders until they find the next one they want them to do, and they hand them the unit, and we start the whole process of moving the unit out and moving another one in. So talk to us about your philosophy around dispatch, and what you've seen work and what you've seen people struggle with.
Dispatching to me is one of the key, most important role that we have in there besides the advisor. That dispatcher is the orchestrator of what's going through our shop in and out. He knows the technicians better, and he's focused on the shop. A service advisor dispatching can't focus on the drive of the shop because they have so many interruptions during the day. So therefore, as Matt, you said, technicians pick and choose what work they want, how many times. The goal is we touch the unit twice. Once when we diag it, second time when we do the finish up, replacement of parts, and finishing up and buttoning up and going. That doesn't happen on an unstructured dispatch system. Too many interruptions when the advisor, even in a small shop, it's very difficult to do that unsuccessfully. It's not successful at all. And the downtime and the shop, nobody who's communicating with moving the units in and out, that dispatching that and knowing, communicating with the porters, what's coming in a half hour before they're done, making sure that, the work order's been QC'd before it gets dispatched to the tech. Otherwise we have unstructured dispatch process, because now we're downtime on that. So what I feel and see that works the best over the years is an overall someone dedicated to driving the hours into that shop.
Yeah, this is something that I found in our organization we would run into. I'd see a technician come up, they'd be finished with what they were doing. The service writer would go over to his stack of work orders or go to his schedule, and he'd say, hey, this part came in for this one, and he'd hand off a work order. Well, there were 5 other parts on order for that work order. We just handed it off. We're going to go through that inefficient process of switching a unit in and switching it back out to install one part, and then do that again, so that in 15 minutes, so that we can pull in the next unit. When in reality, if we know that we're waiting on 4 or 5 other parts, we should be accumulating those parts and then doing one final dispatch. And when you don't have a central dispatching system, it's really easy to fall away from that, and really difficult to keep that clean and organized.
Right, and then when they're completed with that work, the dispatcher, shop foreman's QCing the quality of the work that the technician did on the work order, cause and correction photos, and so when it goes back up front, we now can collect our warranty, we can collect our customer pay. We have a clear road path of exactly what was done with that overall unit.
So what would he say? You and I talked about the different ways that centrally dispatching can happen. And obviously there's probably dealers on here from all different sizes of organizations. Some that have large shops that already have central dispatch and dedicated dispatchers that handle that workflow handout as opposed to service riders. Other shops maybe have shop foremans working, or non-working foremans that can handle it. Um, what is another way? If I'm a small shop and I don't have the ability or the resources to have a dedicated dispatcher, what are some ways that I can ensure that this dispatch process is centralized or at least coordinated?
I've seen it work very well when you have a strong advisor and they have teams where they have their own set of technicians that drive their work so that that way they have a dedicated team rather than trying to say, okay, it's going to this person, then I'm going to have a dispatch. You kind of have it all the way from from a D tech all the way up to an A tech on that team if possible. And then that lead tech is the one helping the advisor. Dispatches, they're also doing QC as well, and pay plans are set up differently, but that will work as well on smaller environments as well. The team system structured to the advisor.
Yeah, in the first shop that I was a foreman in, we had about 8 technicians, and we weren't split into teams. And we had a dispatch problem where we talked about where this chaos that we were talking about just happened, and we actually transitioned to where myself as a foreman was dispatching all of the work to the shop. So service riders would manage, build the work orders, interact with the customer, be that central project management. But me as the foreman decided who worked on what and when. So that's another way
Right.
that can definitely work. Um, the last thing that I want to touch on, and it will lead us into our next slide, is the fact that regardless of who you're having dispatch the work, there's another key component to coordinating this, which is our morning meeting, which falls into our next workflow breakdown that we've talked about, which is communication gaps in service. Mark, I'm going to let you take it from there.
Yeah, I don't know how many of you folks that are on here have a morning meeting or an afternoon meeting before you go home, and you're probably saying, well, I don't have the time for it. Well, you always should make time for your morning meeting. That's how you talk about your business, not at your business, as far as it gives you the opportunity to make sure you're set to go for that day. You're communicating with the parts, making sure the parts that were supposed to have been ordered yesterday got ordered, where we are with our process with that, where we are with our flow into the shop. All of this stuff is important. And we talk about this during our morning meeting. Where are our opportunities? I never call them problems, they're opportunities. So we talk about our business, but when you don't, then you're in total chaos without having communication. This is the perfect time to have your warranty team, your manager, your parts people, manager, your service advisors, your shop foreman, if you have them, and everyone together. And you're talking about the way to continue to improve, making sure we're staying focused with getting our meeting and exceeding our customers' expectations and reducing the amount of time that rec report and those days open ROs.
Yeah, the morning meeting, I can't stress enough. The pushback is always that we don't have time, or the meetings turn into they turn into a complain festival, and we sit there for an hour and we go off on tangents. And there's a real simple solution to this: is you have the meeting first thing every morning. You limit it to 10 or 15 minutes, and you limit the topics to shop work for the day. That's all we're going to talk about. Maybe we're talking about shop work for the day. Maybe we're talking about tomorrow. And then maybe we're talking about a few of the more complicated, maybe deliveries and things we have coming up, but we're limiting it. This is not a service department meeting where we talk about all of the housekeeping things that we might need to work on, where we talk about all of the different performance metrics. This is specifically meant to keep us on track for today, set us up for tomorrow, and make sure that everybody's on the same page and knows what's going on. And you want to limit it to that,
Right.
and be consistent about it. If you have people who can't make it, then they don't make it that day, and you pull them aside and you catch them up at your first opportunity. But you don't hold up or skip the meeting because people can't make it, or there's other conflicts. It's all about consistency and focus.
And to your point, Matt, that when doing $500,000 to $800,000 a month in labor revenue in a shop, there was no way I could miss my morning meetings with the team. They were a key part of us being successful monthly and daily.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If your feeling has been I can't afford the time to do it, I would argue that you can't afford not to. It will save you time and headaches and improve the efficiency and the amount of work you get through your shop dramatically. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. We have a slide, but you take it one step further. You don't just say meet in the morning. You have check-ins throughout the day. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we are inspecting our business throughout the day. We're making sure that we're staying on top of our business. I believe in midday checks. Advisors need to filter through that shop times also in checking, but communicating with your shop foreman, you're making sure that we're staying on focus, that Mr. Smith's coach is going to get done today, like promised. And then before you go home, you're ensuring that the shop has been switched out with the porters so that when the techs come in the meeting after they come in the next day, that they're stacked and ready to go, because now you've had that little 10 or 15-minute meeting also with your techs after you break out front with your management's meeting to get that day going. So yes, huge.
Yeah, and I found that end of the day coordination was almost as important as the beginning of the day. If I had to choose and I could only do one, I'm probably doing the beginning of the day, but nothing drove me more crazy than to have a technician first thing in the morning with nothing to work on. To me, there was no excuse for that. If anybody on this call, anybody watching this has ever been through a factory and you watch how they operate or how they manage that work through the factory building these, they don't, at the end of the day, they don't just stop where they're at, leaving their tools all over the floor, leaving a mess that they have to come in the morning and pick up. Every bay, every station is cleaned, ready to go, and the unit that they're going to start on the next morning is moved into that location so that when they get there in the morning, they're ready to work. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. We can, when the technicians in their day, as administrators, we can take that little bit of extra time for the following 15 minutes or half hour to make sure that everything is set up so that they're ready to work when they get in the morning.
And that's what helps drive it. The correct pay plans are in place. Everybody's financially focused on driving. So everyone's looking for those opportunities to improve that communication because they want to ensure that everyone's being rewarded.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to talk about here before we move on, and we are running into, we're going to run up on time, so we want to keep this moving, but I do want to touch on one other thing. Parts departments need real-time visibility into job status. There are different ways that this can be accomplished. If you're on IDS, the IDS makes job status, makes status visibility, work order status, and job status visibility pretty easy. If you don't know how to leverage certain aspects of the software to do that, reach out to your account manager. We can help you with that. But that visibility from parts into what the status is, I think, is a real key here. We don't want parts operating behind. Everybody should have visibility into the work orders that are open for the service department and what the status of those orders is.
Yeah, kind of like we discussed, everyone has the software, but I believe that not everyone is using it to its full potential. And talking about updating statuses and so on through that whole process of that repair.
Yeah. Out of stock parts can push repair event cycle time up 53 days. While we do see shipping delays from manufacturers and OEMs, we know that can take some time. It typically does not take 53 days on average. So at least a big portion of this is due to workflow breakdowns and mistakes made on the dealer side. And that we can impact. And we're just want to focus on what we can control. So better communication will help with that, and real-time visibility for your parts department into the status of those work orders and coordinated meetings are huge. So the other thing that we see is incomplete or inefficient RO documentation. This is a huge one. And there's some real easy things that we can do to improve this. But Mark, I'm going to let you talk about some of those, but this one is near and dear to me.
Well, it's huge, especially with your DMS, because now with mobile and technology, there should be no excuse for any poor documentation. Clear customer complaints. You're going out, you're using your tablet, you're checking it in, you're taking photos, you're making sure we're writing it down, documenting it properly. Diagnose the direction. That starts that diagnostic process. a detailed write-up starts that, rather than the technician have to come and say, well, I don't understand it. But again, dispatch is ensuring that we have good documentation. The parts research complete. We have to make sure we have the right model, serial numbers. We can get that, beforehand. We're talking to the customer, research what parts we can get in and install that same day that customer's coming in. Authorization for work. Are we getting pre-authorization for work, whether from warranty or from the customer before they leave, to ensure that we take out any of these obstacles that we're talking about? But in today's digital world, technicians can make sure that they're putting their repairs, they're communicating their cause and correction deeply onto their, to ensure that we are capturing every bit of revenue we can, but making sure we're documenting everything very efficiently with today's technology.
I said it earlier in the webinar, and I'll probably say it again before we go. This is about changing our mindset and making sure that everything that we're doing as managers and service writers and parts administrators and warranty administrators is to the end that we're trying to improve the efficiency of the technicians. Their labor is what we're selling. It's what drives our revenue. So look at this list here. Clear complaints, very detailed customer complaints or problems. Begin the diagnostic direction from that, giving as much detail as possible so the technicians are starting a step ahead. Parts research completed up front whenever possible, and pre-authorization done up front whenever possible. If these things typically land on your technician to do first, you look at this list and say, yeah, none of this gets addressed until it gets to the technician's hands, I would really take a hard look at that. Because by the time it gets to the technician's hands, these things should be down. Expanding on the authorization for work piece, I think everybody's mind goes to authorization for warranty or pre-authorization when we know what we're doing. But talk, Mark, a little bit about what we can do to set ourselves up for authorization so that we're not having to go back to the customer all the time.
Well, we always got pre-authorization from a customer, especially if it was cash pay. We're diagnosing, do I have your authorization to spend up to this much if it's this, before I call. Authorization as far as on, warranty work, we would get pre-authorization on things that we did. But most importantly, if if a customer came in and they had a warranty item and it was working intermittently, we would say, hey, if it's working per manufacturer specs, we find nothing. Do I have your authorization to go ahead and look at this? Because if I find no problem, then I'm going to have to bill you because I'm paying my technician. So we would get that clarification up front, because otherwise I can't eat that in policy, and we have to pay tech. So I got to make sure that I'm covered. So pre-authorization, having those conversations before that customer ever leaves your write-up line is important.
Yeah, and I like that. It sets the expectation. It doesn't mean that 100% of the time you're going to end up charging the customer for that. The truth is, you're going to have some goodwill. You're going to have some things that you do to keep the customer happy because it's the right thing to do. Because the greater good here is that we have a satisfied customer who's going to come back for the bigger things. But you can always get the authorization. You can set the expectation up front, and then you're under promising and over delivering if you decide, hey, he looked at it for 5 minutes. It was operator error, but it was obvious what they were doing wrong. I'm not going to charge them. I'm going to explain to them. Now, they were expecting to get charged, and you can go ahead and say, hey, guess what? I'm not charging you anything for this. Here's what's going on. And now you're a hero. So that pre-authorization can be the difference between being able to charge or being a hero versus being a villain here and telling somebody you're charging them for something they weren't expecting.
Right. In this industry, they want to compare it to the automotive. They feel they bring something in for warranty on it, they don't pay for it. They expect that here. All the years I've been in this, you need to get that clarification up front.
Yeah. And this good documentation can help to mitigate the risk of the next one, which is technician workflow interruptions. All the things that we do that interrupt the technician from actually turning a wrench, the things that we can charge for.
Right. That's why all we sell in service is all the thing we have to sell is hours. And if we're pulling our technicians off for parts questions, advisor because I didn't document it properly. The customer's complaint. Parts, we didn't check the availability, or we got a part in and it was wrong, and that now I've got a time I can't collect. Status update request. How do we? Everyone look at your dealership and look how many times you interrupt your tech, or you're pulling them, or they're at the parts counter or service counter. Why are they in those areas? They should be doing nothing but turning billable hours in their shop. And if they're in any one of these areas, then we have to analyze. You guys need to look at how can we improve that flow.
Yep. And there may be differing opinions of this, but we would go so far as if a technician, if we needed additional information from a unit after a technician had done a diagnostic, and it was something that the service writer or the warranty administrator could get themselves, we had the service writer and the warranty administrator go out and get it. We didn't quote unquote punish the tech or teach the tech a lesson by making them go do it. If it was something that we could do, that's a really expensive lesson to teach your technician. And there are other ways to manage that part of their performance through simply managing it, having check-ins with your technician, expressing what they're doing well, identifying what they're not doing well, holding them accountable to do it correctly. But getting a chip on our shoulder and saying they didn't get this, so I'm going to make them go out there and pull the unit out and open it back up and get it, so that they remember the next time and they don't have to do it again. I would argue that's a really expensive lesson to teach, and that there's better ways to do that.
Right. If I paid you 8 hours premise time, I want 8 to 10 hours bill collectible. And if anything is stopping, we got to fix it.
Yep. The parts question and availability checks. This is a big one. This is a real problem, and it is a time-consuming one to mitigate. I haven't found a way to mitigate this without spending time, to the point that in our shops, we actually made it a position. We had a parts position. In the first one that we ever tried, this was a former technician. He was a great technician from a knowledge standpoint, but he had some efficiency challenges that he couldn't seem to overcome. And so we found a different role for him. We had this problem, and we put him in as a special order parts specialist. Essentially, his entire job was to receive special order parts, open them up, check them for accuracy and condition, repackage them often differently than they got shipped, because these need to sit on the shelf for a week or so, and we need to know they're not going to get damaged. He repackaged those. He labeled them, so they were clearly labeled that he'd been located them. And then when the technicians were ready to have their next unit pulled in, he had already kitted these parts and put them in a designated location for this technician so that those parts were already there. Yes, it was laborsome to do, but the improvements it made in the efficiency and the amount of times it reduced us having to pull a unit in just for the technician to get the parts, spend 20 minutes looking for them all and rounding them up, just to open them up and find out that the critical part he needed first was damaged or wrong, and then pull the whole thing out and start it over on the next one. It was just so expensive that this paid for itself several times over. Was it an expensive solution? Absolutely. Did it pay for itself several times over? 100% it did. So I just give that anecdote to illustrate the fact that even if the solution seems laborsome, when you weigh it against the cost of the technician paying for it in his time, it usually will pencil out on paper.
And not every unit has to be pulled back into the shop to have a part put on there. Sometimes there's a lot of small parts take you 5 minutes to walk out there or whatever and pop that in there versus moving and everything else. And so you got to look at every thing that you do throughout the day, move to make sure that it makes sense.
Yeah. So before we get to the end, we got about 4 minutes here before I want to open it up to questions. So I do want to make sure we get through this last one. So we've put all these different workflow pieces in place. We're having our morning meetings. We've reduced technician interruptions by ensuring that we're checking in parts and verifying them beforehand. We're documenting well. We've got those pieces all in place. Now we need to be accountable for this. None of this works unless we're inspecting what we expect. So talk to us a little bit about the accountability piece of this.
Numbers don't lie. I always tell people your numbers tell you the true measurement of what's going on. So if you're monitoring your KPIs, you're posting your technician hours on a TV monitor in a shop that builds competition. I know sometimes people get a little frustrated, but they'll get over that. But it's good to be very transparent on your numbers, part of the morning meeting. But you know, all of this stuff as far as staging the jobs, like we talked about, dispatch, discipline, you know, making sure that the right job is going to the right person and that we have all the information that we need once that's been repaired. You know, technicians have a responsibility level in this as well. I won't make it ever sound like technician doesn't have any responsibility, but to repair the unit, no, they have a ton of responsibility, making sure they're getting the good photos, making sure their stories are very detailed and organized, and that we can collect what we're getting, you know, what we need to get paid for. Repair order quality coming from the advisor, you know, and just all of this. But measuring your daily numbers daily to be able to grow your business. If you're not monitoring your KPIs, you're in trouble.
Yep. Yeah, I really like the displaying technician productivity or efficiency to in a public place so that everybody can see where they stack up against their peers in the shop. This is something that we put in place. We did get some resistance to it, but we pushed forward with it. And I would challenge anybody who's worried about resistance to this to say that there's really only one reason to be resistant to this, and it's that you don't want to be held accountable for your performance. And anybody who doesn't want to be held accountable for their performance, I would take a real hard look at there, because that's a red flag for me. But I found that by keeping this out in front of people, it did have a psychological effect. Nobody wants to be last on the list. Nobody wants to look like they're not pulling their weight. Generally, I found that people want to come in and do a good job. And so let them know. If we don't measure it, we're not going to manage it. And a lot of this stuff gets self-managed if people know where they stand. So I encourage you, if you're not posting it, if you're not measuring it, start there. If you're not measuring your technician's efficiency actively, and I'm always surprised at how many shops don't know their shop's effective efficiency and each technician's effective efficiency. If you're not measuring it, it's absolutely mandatory. You've got to measure it if you want it to improve, but go a step further and post it publicly. I don't know a single sales department that doesn't post their sales performance so that every salesman knows where they stack. They run challenges, they run initiatives, they have bonuses for it. Every salesman knows where they stack up against their fellow salesmen, because they produce revenue. They're the revenue producers on the other side of the fence of the dealership. Technicians are the same.
And it's just no different than your advisors. The hours per RO on your cash pay. How are you measuring this? And, you know, your hours per RO on your warranty. All of that. It builds competition, and the technicians' numbers posted in front of everybody. It builds everybody. It wants to be competitive, whether they like it or not, because their peers force them to be.
Yep. So we do have an example here of our daily workflow control system. We talked about this already, but this is our morning meetings. And I'm gonna let you run through this real quick about what we're doing in each of these workflow control check-ins throughout the day, Mark.
Your morning meeting, you're talking about the numbers that you had the previous day, and you're talking about where your expectations are for today, and making sure that everyone has a clear vision of that. You know, you're making sure that the work parts that were on order that came in yesterday, now those are going to the front of the dispatch pile for that technician so that they're not waiting. You know, you're confirming the parts availability that they came in, they are the correct part, because now we're opening up work orders. But we're talking about all of this in our morning meeting. We're setting those productivity, you know, your targets. We're setting that we're wanting this many hours through this shop. Here's our budget for the month. Here's where we're targeting. We're halfway into the month, and either we're good or we're not good, and we need to figure out how to get there. Midday, you know, we're looking at where we are in progress with the work that we had in the shop, getting new work in there, and completion from start to finish. How much work is coming in and out of there? How many billable hours are we going to get out of that shop today? Address in any workflow. Where's our problems at? Are we getting the work in and out of there as far as into the shop? Is it a work order? Making sure that we're staying on task and staying focused on our day's objective. Reassign stalled jobs. If someone can't get it, the shop foreman is on top of that, making sure that we're getting that done. But the advisor is all part of every one of these 3 checks. Update the customer on ETAs. You can't go home that day until you called every one of your customers. Now with Connect or all the digital, we can text. We don't have to do that. It's pick up the phone all the time. At the end of the day, we're reviewing where our performance was, what we accomplished, where we need to be for tomorrow to make up for what we lost today as far as in hours, or getting customers' expectations and make sure that we're exceeding them. Staging tomorrow's work, I talked about that. You don't leave that building until that shop's been changed out. So when the techs come in the morning, they're hitting the floor running. Identify, we talk about jobs that didn't get done today. They have to be the first one getting hit tomorrow, providing we have everything necessary to do that. And if it's in your shop, we're turning hours. If we're not turning billable hours on something, then you get it out of your shop and replace it with something you're billing hours. And prepping the next day, we talk about that. All of this stuff is normal business operation as part of the flow, part of everything that we do, and part of being, we haven't talked about absorption on this call, but this webinar, but all of this stuff helps us increase our absorption at the end of the day.
Yep. Inspect it often and on a regular cadence. If we wait until the end of the month or the end of the quarter to look at this stuff, it's just a history lesson, and we can make adjustments, but we don't get to see whether those adjustments had a positive or negative impact until the next time we review it at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. If we're looking at this multiple times daily, at least these check-ins and our workflows for what we're working on right now, then we can make real-time adjustments that can affect the outcome so that we're not disappointed at the end of the month and adjusting things that we don't get to see again until the end of the following month. We can make real-time adjustments that get us to our targets in real time.
It's very difficult to chase it after a month.
Yep. And with that, I do want to just kind of wrap us up. Closing message here. The demand for service already exists. Dealerships that control their workflow convert demand into profit. And the difference between average and high-performing shops is operational discipline. So that's the message we want you to go away with. At this point, we have a few minutes left to open this up for questions if there are any.
I mean, everyone on here, if you don't take anything away, just back up a second and just look at what's causing you the biggest headache. What do you suffer the most complaining about? And look at that and dive down into that and say, what can we do to fix it? Start somewhere. If you continue to do what you're doing, and maybe your performance and everybody on here is running at 110%. I doubt that. But so I'm sure that there are opportunities that could help you increase your customer satisfaction in the long run and increase your revenue. Absolutely.
We have 2 questions in here that are the same question, and it's an easy answer, so I'll field this one. Can we get a copy of the presentation? Was it recorded? I got to ask that twice. The answer is yes, has been recorded, and yes, we will be sharing out a copy with everybody who both attended and registered. So if you registered and obviously you're not hearing this right now, but if you have people in your organization that registered that couldn't attend, they'll get a copy of this as well. So the answer to that is yes.
Good. Okay.
And
hopefully everyone's enjoyed it.
So I want to thank everybody for getting on today. We will also share out, it looks like in our slides here, we don't have a slide that has our contact information. So I'll make sure that gets shared out with the recording to everybody. But you can email me at matt.richards@ids-astra.com. And Mark?
Hi, you can email me at mark@crossroadsofamericaconsulting.com.
And again, we'll share that out with the recording as well so that everybody has contact information for us. Don't hesitate to reach out. We are happy to answer any questions you have or just shoot the breeze about and talk shop with you.
Yep, I'll be willing to answer anybody's questions that they have. I love doing that. So please send them my direction if you have any. And again, thank you for taking the time and joining us today, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.